Hello folks, I hope you're having a great day today. Hey, today I want to take a look at a sequel for a recent video that I did on Mystara. This is again not where my channel is going to be going, it's just another kind of one of them. And so I'm kind of recording this as kind of a bonus video for y'all. I'm still going to do my normal reviews and such. For those people that are, normally on my channel for its reviews of various fantasy, science fiction, and horror works that are oftentimes lost. And this is kind of a sequel to a channel that I did just recently for you folks, where I looked at some of the pulp era influences, so these pre-Tolkienian influences in the Dungeons & Dragons' plane Mystara. Now Mystara is my favorite plane. It's one of the oldest ones in the TSR canon. It started out in the late 70s. It was the default plane for the Dungeons & Dragons basic sets, expert, companion, and so forth. So you had the initial basic experts, BX, and then you had the BECME stuff to follow that were all kind of set in this area. So it was one of the first ones to be fleshed out sort of in the canon. Because it wasn't the more popular ones for the AD&D adventure and those sorts of things, it became, I think, a good place to have a different feeling world. And because I think it was so early on, and people were coming into it that had really enjoyed the pulp era, and a lot of those influences, and so what you ended up seeing is not a traditional Tolkienian heroic fantasy setting like Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance, or even to a lesser degree Greyhawk. Instead, what you see is a very different feeling place. Its central conflict is still law versus chaos, not good versus evil, and it also has it doesn't have a lot of this Tolkienian style of world building, of storytelling that's a part of it. And while it certainly does have a lot of these, sort of influences that come from Middle Earth, from elves to halflings, dwarves, orcs, it has a lot of these sorts of ideas. This idea of this giant spanning conflict between good and evil, or some of the details like rangers aren't here. You're not going to see it doesn't exist as a class. You're not going to see things in this area like the halflings are very different than the hobbits that you will see there. Unlike some of the other planes where they're pretty much just straight out of the but much like the Dragonlance Kryn with their Kender, the Hin here are very different. They're adventuring. They have magical abilities. They're very different than, I think, the culture of the halfling there, so I think it's a little bit different than the hobbits in Middle Earth. So there are some differences. But the big giant central conflict of good versus evil that's in Middle Earth, that's in most of heroic fantasy that follows, is missing. It's completely absent from Mystara. And I think that's one of the central things that makes Mystara to me, is that it's not this central sort of good versus evil, hey, all the good guys are here, all the bad guys are there, and everybody line up and fight each other. That's not it at all. Now, there are certainly people that are good, people that are bad, people that are lawful, people that are chaotic. Certainly you're going to come across those. But even in its major sort of central conflict, though, is between these two empires, Thracia and Alphacia, neither of which are good or bad. They're both sort of just kind of middle of the road. There are people who are pro in both of those who are good people, and pro those that are bad people that you want to fight against. And so you'll see both of these sort of with their own satellite nations that are fighting each other. They're going to have proxy wars. They're going to have some colonists that are going to push into different regions of the map in order to push against each other. There are a lot of these sort of real things that happen in the real world that are also happening in Mystara, which I think really grounds it. But again, it has a strong pulp sense to it. So I did a video for you that this is kind of a sequel to. So what I want to do for you today is take a look at 10 separate modules that I use regularly in my own Mystara campaigns. Mystara is, to this day, the only pre-built world that I still use for my players and so forth. It's an easy world to pick up for people. They don't have to have read a bunch of novels or read 5 or 6 books to tell you about the world. It's not a hard world to pick up because of its allegories to real world stuff. And it has, in some places, outside of like maybe Alphacia and Glantry and stuff, some lower magic stuff happening. And a lot of technology-based stuff too. It's also, because it's pulp era, more influenced than Tolkien and post-Tolkien stuff when it comes to the big giant flavors of the world. You're also getting that sort of a very, very different feel to it, and so it's much more things that people may be familiar with from earlier works like Coney and Robert E. Howard or Clark Ashton Smith, or just to a lesser degree Lovecraft. So what I want to do for you then is take a look at today 10 adventure modules that I love using with my players. They really enjoy for the world. They fit the world perfectly, particularly my sort of, this is the crazy pulp adventure gonzo world that has a lot of these pulp influences from a lot of these pulp subgenres, from the flying genre with its biplanes, you know, to the western genre with its cowboys and Indians. You're going to see all those things in Mystara. So having understand that there's a lot of these genres out there, a lot of these things will fit in, and they'll fit into various nations and stuff very, very nicely. So let's go ahead and get started. I have an honorable mention before I get to my top 10, and it's Caverns of Thracia. And this is a Judges Guild module. This is actually my favorite Judges Guild module. Some people may prefer Dark Tower or the City-State. Or something like that. And there's actually something else from Judges Guild that's going to hit higher on my list. I actually think this is my favorite one, but in terms of how well it fits into Mystara, I think it's not as perfect a fit. It does have it comes from the early games. For folks who may not know much about the Judges Guild stuff, this Judges Guild came out very early on in the Dungeons & Dragons life cycle, and they were basically putting out official supplements for Dungeons & Dragons. And this was actually very common during the time. You saw a lot of these supplements coming out from Judges Guild, and sometimes from other companies too that had officially licensed product. It feels much more like the 3rd edition, when you have the same thing happening with its open sort of system, and they encourage people to write and use everything that they didn't consider to be something that was a key part of their own identity. So it kind of feels similar to that if you're familiar with that and all the rules books that came up and modules that came about during the 3rd edition era. Well, you saw that in the first era of Dungeons & Dragons too. And Judges Guild, for a lot of years, put out a lot of these different modules, as well as expansions on things like Hell, before the planes were sort of codified. So you're seeing a lot of these sorts of supplements, modules from Judges Guild. And you'll see 2 of them making my list. This is my favorite. It's a Greek mythology themed module. It can fit anywhere. The higher levels are going to be a little easier, but as your party delves down into deeper levels, it's going to get a little more difficult, a little more challenging for them. Because of its Greek mythology, it really can fit pretty much anywhere in a lot of different places. I like putting it in Thyatis, the empire. It's a Roman Empire analogy in my nation, so I like sliding it in there. It can fit in pretty much anywhere in Thyatis, or in some other places too that have sort of a traditional mythological feel that you may be building in your world. But again, there's Caverns of Thracia. I won't talk about too much because I don't want to spend too much time on today's. My previous one was 45 minutes long, and some people were like suitably like, I'm gonna do it a little less shorter, so that's fine. So I'm going to go through these a little bit faster for you, and that one's also not on one of my top 10 anyway. So I'm just giving you a quick little shout out to Caverns of Thracia. It's my honorable mention for you. And now let's get started with the actual list. And so my number 10 is All That Glitters. Well, it's actually not All That Glitters. It's actually the 7th one in here, Dark Clouds Gather. I couldn't find it when I was looking through my UK modules while I'm putting together this. I have them all, and I've used it pretty frequently. It's actually Dark Clouds Gather. It's UK 7. And UK 7 has this incredibly just strong, pulpish feel to it. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to start out in a place near the mountains. You're going to come across, your party's going to come across one of the birdmen, Eric Hakara. That birdman is going to be attacked by local villagers. It's been stripped of its feathers, and so you're going to have to save it. And then once you save it, it's going to tell you why it was there, and it's looking for help. Its people are being attacked and killed in mass by these people that previously were their friends, storm giants that are up there in their sky castles. So you're going to fly on up to this person's area, and you're going to meet with their area. You're going to see what's happening kind of on the ground, air level, but you're going to find out what's happening. The local shaman there is going to start taking some drugs in order to find out what is actually happening, and get some predictions and prophecies for what to do. While that's happening, an attack gets launched by these folks. They're like these demons that are in this storm giant's castle, and it seems like the storm giants, who are normally good people or neutral, are aligned with this sort of demonic influence, and so you're going to have to deal with both of them as they attack. Ultimately, an attack is going to be too strong. The city's going to, the area that's up in there is going to be destroyed. They're going to have to go back to a fallback position that they have that you're going to use as your new base. Once you do that, prophecy is going to be seen. They're going to send you off to go chase down some stuff in the ice. You're going to find a flying manta skyfish that you're going to bring back to help you rally some people that you're going to help to use as a platform, a battle platform against the sky castle that you're going to eventually have to take over and assault in air combat. So that's kind of the storyline framework for, you know, this final Dark Clouds Gather final. It's just so pulp. Flying sky castles. You're going to get a sky manta that you're going to fly into. That almost feels like it's a straight thing from, say, or from a little bit post-pulp. In this case, I think it's, you know, a little bit from Dying Earth, from the 50s, from 1950 specifically, which was still pre-Tolkienian as the Lord of the Rings didn't come out for 5 or 6 years after that. It has these bizarre, fun. I mean, the system makes sense. What's happening makes sense, but at the same time, you know, you're going to fight against sky castles. You're getting this flying sky manta ship that you got to fly in. That's just, you know, incredibly crazy and evocative. So I think that is a very, very good example of something that you can do. In my most recent run, I included it in my Norwell campaign as a module in the mountains that are up there in the northern part, right outside of Norwell. It fits anywhere where you've got mountains, flying creatures. The giants are also in my star. They're one of the normal giants that you'll come across. And you can easily slide in another flying race for the Irkaka if you don't have them in your world. It's fine. It's not a problem at all. There's a lot of flying races that you'll find in Sky Ballista. You can easily slide one of them in if you wanted to, like tabbies or something like that. Although I do like having Irkaka, I also think that they fit. Having a flying bird person feels like it fits the world. So if you wanted to do that, I don't have any issues with that. But again, you can feel free to substitute that in for your own world building. There's my number 10. Let's now take a look at my number 9. Example. Now my number 9 example for you folks is going to be treasure maps, treasure chests. These are a supplement. Basically what they do for you is they give you a bunch of treasure, particularly this one, will actually give you treasure maps to various places that you can then go explore. Here, I'll give you just one quick example. Here's one I pulled out for you. As you can see, it's a pyramid treasure map that gives you a pyramid here. You can give your players and take a look at. On the back side here, it shows you the various rules for you as the DM with your DM's notes. You can see how quick easy that is to do. And that's your adventure module. It's very quick. It can slide into a lot of different things. Everybody loves treasure maps, treasure chests. It's a key part of exploration, which is a key part of you know, exploring the world is a key part of the Mystara design, right? It was from the pulp era. You know, people were exploring the coasts. They were exploring underwater. They were heading on up to the poles, right? They're doing archaeological digs, right? It's all about exploration. That was big during the era. So their pulp era fiction was also big into that too. So Mystara has a lot of that. You're sailing out to the Isle of Dread, which isn't on the maps, but it will be after you go out that way. You'll be you're going to be constantly exploring, finding new things. That's one of the key elements of this world is exploring new places, the Hollow World, you know, the Savage Coast, and so you're exploring all these cool places. And I think that you know, the treasure maps concept with the treasure chest and treasure map supplements fit perfectly into this sort of idea. It also has very much something that just fits so perfectly in, and the one that I showed you is a desert one. There's in a pyramid, but there's so many of them out there. They're really cool that you can definitely dig into, that look at everything from desert mastambas to a traditional treasure map of a pirate in an island that you could easily slide into, say, the Sea of Dread or something like that. So there's a lot of these really cool things that are happening in a treasure map sort of format where you go explore things. So that for you is my next one. So let's move on to my number 8. Now, my number 8 is going to be my highest hitting of the Judges Guild. And this is what we're taking a look at is TEGEL Manor. If you want to look at the old version of TEGEL Manor, it's here. This is from the late 70s. TEGEL Manor is probably, and in my previous one, I talked about Castle Amber, and I'm going to be talking a lot about that. Castle Amber was my number 5 choice for an example of how pulp this era was. And it was this just crazy, bizarre dungeon that is incredibly gonzo. It has these people that have been around for a long time in this area of the castle, and they have been around for such a long time that they've started to go insane and crazy, and so weird things are happening on an ongoing basis. Every room, it's just weird. It's goes all bonds, and that has this sort of base reason for why it's happening, but I mean, it's really just, and it has a direct connection to a pulp world that was inspired by Clark, almost literally from Clark Ashton Smith's work that he himself created for Weird Tales in the 30s. So it's directly from a pulp era. It's literally, I mean, even the name of the world is the same. So you had this connection to this world. So it's very pulp. If I like running Castle Amber first, and then if my party loved it, if they thought it was amazing, then I'll throw TEGEL Manor out, because TEGEL Manor feels like it's like 2 Castle Ambers in one adventure. It's so much more gonzo than Castle Amber could ever think of being. And Castle Amber is the most bizarre, you know, published by TSR module ever. But this is the most bizarre module that I've ever encountered. And it's like twice as bizarre as Castle Amber. So if they loved that sort of, you know, weird style of having just crazy rooms, crazy things that are happening, crazy scenarios, where they never knew what was going to happen, if they love that, then they're going to love TEGEL Manor. But on the other hand, if they were just like, you know, it's a nice change of pace, but I don't really want to do it again, don't give this to them. Or if they were like, nah, I didn't like that at all, then don't even think about running TEGEL Manor. But TEGEL Manor is for people who liked Castle Amber. They will love TEGEL Manor. And people who love Castle Amber, man, TEGEL Manor is going to be their thing. They're going to rave about it for the rest of the campaign. Again, on the other hand, if they didn't like Castle Amber, they're going to hate TEGEL Manor. So, I like to use Castle Amber as a barometer for if this party's going to like this or not, and then put it in there. But again, I like it. It has a lot of this old school stuff. For example, one room, it has zombies that are bowing down and worshiping basically a giant rat. Things like that are happening. It's set in this haunted manor. The person who sold it wants to sell it, has been trying to sell it. The only living member of the family. You're going to run into the family's ghosts, and there's more than 100 of them on a random table. You've got a lot of these just crazy, weird things that are happening from room to room to room. And you'll see, you know, a polymorph demon in a form of a grandma, stuff like that. That you got, and so if you do your normal thing and treat the grandma nicely, obviously you're gonna, which very much to me kind of evokes the style of Castle Amber. So again, if you like that in Castle Amber, you're gonna love it here, or vice versa. So, but then anyway, there's number 8. That's TEGEL Manor from Judges Guild. All right, now for my next 2, what I want to do is say, if you are interested in adding another subgenre from the pulp era to the world, then I think that there are some successful ways to do that. One of the missing subgenres I talk about is the Cthulhu mythos, because you know, in an exploration world, it's all about you doing great stuff, you succeeding. It's the exact opposite of the Cthulhu mythos. And if you're looking up here, you're going to know that I love the Cthulhu mythos, right? I've got more Cthulhu books on my bookshelf than anything else, right? I'm not talking badly about it, but in the Cthulhu mythos, there's no agency for you as a player or as a DM, right? It's all about you finding out how bad this stuff is and then going crazy, right? You're not going to fix the world, you're not going to solve the world. But my star is very much about you as the player having the agency to change the world. You can do anything you want to. Literally, the modules are designed for whatever you want to do, you could do. Like the Isle of Dread, you go there, it gives the framework for example, a pirate buccaneer base. Now, you can go there and take it out. You can blow them up, take them out if you want to, or you can meet with them, talk with them, negotiate with them, hire them to do some stuff, whatever you want to do. It's there, right? But what you as the players want to do with that base, you can do. You can do anything you want to with them. They're there, right? Now, similarly, you know, there's that agency, but most Cthulhu mythos-inspired things aren't going to have that sort of player agency, right? It's you learning about how bad things are, and oh my god, right? So, but I do think that there is a place where you can kind of bring it in a little bit, not as big as that is, where it's being a big giant influence into the world and it changes your world to much more darker stuff. But there is, I think, a place that you can do it, and it's with these 2 modules. What I have for you there is the Lost Caverns of, and I cannot pronounce that to save my life, so I'm not even going to try. And then over here is the Forgotten Temple. Both of these are highly rated by Gary Gygax. This one loosely follows into the Forgotten Temple, although the Forgotten Temple is really kind of where that influence is felt very strongly. Both of them have, particularly the Forgotten Temple, has a dark, forgotten god who has a bit of a Cthulhu mythos, a Lovecraftian feel to it. So you could easily do it without giving the player some agency, having some forgotten caverns, some forgotten temples, forgotten gods. It feels very sort of, you know, it definitely feels pulpish. It doesn't feel like, you know, stuff that happened after Middle-earth was introduced to the world, you know, with the Lord of the Rings in the mid-50s that changed kind of fantasy. So it has that sort of you know, Middle-earth, Lord of the Rings feel to it. Definitely evokes the, you know, like I said, again, the Cthulhu mythos in various ways. I think the first one more evokes Abraham Merritt, although you're going to see Abraham Merritt being more evoked higher up on this list. But again, you get this idea that you can kind of have this sort of Cthulhu mythos style of storytelling if you wanted to add it to your Mystara. I've done it with my groups. People have liked it, particularly the first one, and how it kind of lead into the second one if you want it to, but doesn't have to. And also, I think the way that Gary Gygax does this is very nicely done. And you'll see the Forgotten Temple as one of the highest rated modules by a lot of people, a lot of old school players. Adding it into your campaign is going to be something you can easily do, and I think you'll get a lot of value from it if that's something you're sticking to doing. And then here's my number 6 for you. My number 6 is going to do the exact same thing, but with murder mysteries. And that's the Assassin's Knot, L2. The good thing about the Assassin's Knot is that if you wanted to add in the sort of the detective pulp, which was very, very popular. It was one of the most popular, most read pulps during the pulp era, but there's not really a whole lot of detective stories. This is really more the plane of adventuring, going out there and finding stuff and doing things, right? But if you wanted to add in sort of a detective mystery style of storytelling, if you want to add that into with modules, L2, the Assassin's Knot is a perfect thing to do in order to try to figure out what that does. It'll add that feel in. It's also a highly rated a module 2. I think L1 is actually a little better, but that's just as a module, just generally speaking. I actually think L1 is a little bit better, but L2 is great. It has a lot of great things, and I have run it twice with my players and they've enjoyed it. So that's there for you in case it's something you're interested in adding in. All right, now before I take a look at my top 5, what I wanted to do is give a few shout outs to a couple of other things that almost made my list but just didn't quite make it in. I think you're not going to see them. Just a quick shout out. One is, I think most of the Al-Qadim modules are going to fit very nicely from the Forgotten Realms, are going to fit very, very nicely into this area. They have a very strong sort of Arabian feel. They can fit places where you have your sort of Arabian style storytelling, deserts, and so forth. There's a lot of places that you could do that into, although particularly the setting of the places, the Master of Desert Nomads and Temple of Death that I mentioned from my previous module at my number 10 influences are a key place of doing that. But again, that's there for you. If you want to do it like the Emirates of Yalarim, for example, is an obvious place that you could put them in. And I think that all of them fit the sort of style of storytelling that was done in the pulps in this time for the desert pulps, the eastern pulps that were out there that were very, very popular during this era. Also a shout out, I don't own any of them, but a quick shout out to the first two Oriental Adventure pulp modules. I think they both work very well. If you're for those sort of Oriental style settings that you're looking for, they were the first two that come out after the Oriental Adventures, and they have about 3 or more adventures in each of them, so you can kind of find what you like for your party and set them in different places based on that. The next shout out is going to go to Lost Shrine. This is actually an RPGA module. It's perfect for Mystara. Its central conflict is law versus chaos, not good versus evil. It's set in a lost shrine that's been lost, that was dedicated to law, that has had to be given over to chaos. It's incredibly well done, incredibly well crafted. If you're not familiar with it, I would recommend it. You can fit into lots of different places, and because its central conflict is already a Mystaran one, which is more law versus chaos than it is good versus evil, and you can easily slide this in many different places. I actually put this in the Hollow World in one of my campaigns because of how just easy it is to put into a lot of different places. But I actually put it in with Hollow World. So there you are. Also, shout outs to White Plume Mountain, which again I'm not doing. White Plume Mountain's not bad. I think it's great stuff. And Return, obviously, it's not a bad one either. But White Plume Mountain, obviously, is a pretty good module. It's definitely something that people know. It does feel a little, you know, one of the things you don't see a lot of in Pulp Era is the use of volcanoes in the sort of modern fantasy context. You don't see lava fields or anything like that. You do go to volcanoes, they're certainly there, but they're not used in the same way that they're used in modern fantasy. And White Plume Mountain does use its volcano in more of a modern fantasy style, probably because of the influence of Mountain Doom. I mean, you're going to a volcano for your entire journey. And then you get there and then you're going to, you know, throw some jewelry in it and so forth. So you're there for a while too. So I think maybe because of that, the nature of volcanoes in fantasy may have changed afterwards. And White Plume Mountain, I think everything in it except for its use of the volcano feels like a Pulp Era more style, but afterwards it does have that sort of more of a post, you know, 55, 56. Once the Miller sort of changed fantasy, kind of that sort of a post style use of the volcano. So if that's something you're fine with, feel free to toss it in there. I have before, very successfully. I actually set it in my Isle of Dread campaign, and people really liked it. And then I did Return later because they really liked the White Plume. So if you can do some great stuff with it, I think you can do it well. A couple of little quick shout outs. Doom Grinder isn't a great module, but it's perfect for Mystara. I say it's not a great module because I think that Earthshaker does this concept better. Earthshaker is a module from Dungeons and Dragons that was done by David Cook. That has the big giant thing that's happening that's destroying everything. This is going to do the same thing. It's got a big giant construct that's going to be destroying everything. People didn't know it was there because it has like its top is like it's a weird sort of building construction with propellers that look like on top of it that look like windmills. So people didn't think it was it was actually like a construct until it wakens up and starts destroying the countryside. Now I do like that idea, this big giant mechanical thing. It works. You'll need, if you want to make it a little bit better, you'll probably have to do some work for it as a DM. But so it's not the best module in the world, but it's got a lot of that sort of great sort of substance and style that definitely fits the Pulp Era and suits Mystara perfectly. Then finally, a shout out to Labyrinth of Madness, which I think is great. This will add in, I think, another sort of that sort of horror, light aspects of the Cthulhu mythos. That's what you're looking to do. You can easily put it anywhere in your campaign. I had mine, in a campaign over in Karamikos. It's easy, but it's easy. You can fit it in anywhere you want it to, and it's another sort of those sort of examples. But now let's turn to my top 5 because I don't want to spend too much time on this for you folks. Let's take a look at number 5. My number 5 choice here is the Dwellers of the Forbidden City. It's the I1 module for you there. I think this module is better than a lot of people give it credit for. I think this is one of the best Abraham Merritt modules you're going to find out there. And actually, I think it's probably my favorite Abraham Merritt module. For those of you who may not be familiar, A. Merritt he's in the Science Fiction Hall of Fame. He was a writer during the Pulp Era. He wrote a lot of big stories during them, like Dwellers in the Mirage, the Moon Pool, Ship of Ishtar. He's got a lot of them out there. He was probably the biggest writer during that era. And he has a lot of these sort of, he's like the first one to kind of look at dungeon delving, exploring, and this sort of idea of finding something really cool under something that you didn't think was there at all. I think Dwellers of the Forbidden City is great at doing that. It feels very much like The Lost City, which is also a classic module that you can slide right on into an adventure module. I think it slides perfectly into lots of different places in the known world. You can add a whole bunch of really good, solid, detailed stuff to your Mystara campaign. So I could not recommend it enough. It's perfectly pulp, perfectly suitable for your place, and it feels very, very nice pretty much anywhere you put it. I've actually used it in multiple places in Mystara in the past in my campaigns, and I've put it in many different places for folks. And my most recent one, I actually used it in the Isle of Dread campaign too, and my number 4 I've actually used probably most successfully in my Isle of Dread campaign too, but Dwellers can go anywhere, and it's great because of that, because you can pretty much put it anywhere you want to do it. So that's number 4, Dwellers of the Forbidden City. Next, number 3 is the Hidden Shrine of TOMOACHAN. This is my next one for you. Now, the Hidden Shrine of TOMOACHAN has what makes it so great for me is that, here I'll show you the back side of it where you can start to see this sort of a style. It's a central American themed module in terms of the flavor, which I think works incredibly well. There was a lot of these sort of adventures into places that had shrines, temples, in the sort of the Central Asian part of the pulps. Robert E. Howard, for example, will talk about this when somebody had gone into one of these Mesoamerican pyramids and came back with one in his horror short story, The Thing on the Rooftop. So this is something you definitely are seeing in the pulp era. It's incredibly evocative of that style. Nothing in it says, hey, this came after, the big hit of J.R.R. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. I think he's a great writer. I love him to death. He's one of my favorite fantasy writers. But still, it's nice to have a world and this is a perfect example of a module that has nothing to do with him at all, right? And I think there's value in that. Adding those in, and as it's perfect feel to it. I again used it in my Isle of Dread campaign because I felt that a Mesoamerican temple and a culture that used to exist in the Isle of Dread made perfect sense for that style of world and that area of the world. You can easily put it other places from the Isle of Dawn to many other places. Put it around other places around the world if you wish to. It suits Mystara so perfectly that there's just pretty much nothing more that I can say about it. So I'll move on to my next one. All right, here's my number 3 choice for you. Here's number 3 is Isle of the Ape. Actually, I think I mentioned it as number 3, but that was number 4. Number 3 is Isle of the Ape by Gary Gygax. This is my classic for you. It's the last one for you that's going to be sort of in the sort of more traditional Greyhawk stuff, although my number 1 technically is Greyhawk. But here you are, and this is Isle of the Ape. Isle of the Ape feels like King Kong. Now, what's going to happen as a trap in another dungeon, you're going to be teleported to a plane of existence that's going to be this subplane. It's a trap that's meant to punish you, so you can put it in as a dungeon master in a particularly nasty place. You can put it in Labyrinth of Madness. I actually had mine in Castle Greyhawk itself, and it will take you over here. The place that it sends you, it just totally evokes the King Kong story from the 40s, where you're going to a Skull Island with the primitives that worship King Kong. You're going to run into King Kong. You'll run into a lot of other gargantuan creatures, a King Kong-like ape. You're going to run into a lot of other things too, and you won't be able to leave the island until you this islandish subplane until you end up dealing with a lot of the things and the issues that are happening there. So you just can't run and leave. Also, the plane has a lot of issues that are meant to impact high-level parties and make them weaker. You can't summon things. A lot of your spells are no longer going to work. So it has a lot of sort of breaks on the normal ways that parties might have relied on it. And one of the things I like doing is to, as a DM when I run this, I like to add some more based on what the party has been successfully leaning on. So if they've been leaning on healing spells more, I might have healing spells be sort of nuked a little bit more. Whatever they've been using as a crutch to get through adventures, if they are using that as a crutch more and more often, I like to run this, and then I'll just put rules in it for that temporary world that they're in that help to hurt whatever it is they were using. I think it's good to help push your party enough to do some other things. I mean, again, it's just a challenge for your party. It comes across in a dungeon module. And then once they're done, they teleport back out. So it's not like it's the biggest, challenge in the world in that sort of terms or world building. But the world building that it has, because it's so King Kong Skull Islandish, it feels very much like Isle of Dread. It feels very much like, the center of your Hollow World that are very much having dinosaurs and big giant monsters that are fighting each other. It feels like that. So it has a perfect feel. You could do a subplane that's totally different than Mystara, and it would technically be fine, but I think that when your subplane has a different genre, it's great. You could also even just add this in. You could just make it a part of Hollow World and just have these separate rules or something like that. You could easily do that for a variety of places too, or just make it an island in the Sea of Dread if you wanted to, and add some weird rules to it. Feel encouraged to use it and abuse it as you wish. Number 2 is the Desert of Desolation series. Now this series was published in the it's been republished in Forgotten Realms in this particular version. It takes 3 modules that are amazing back-to-back-to-back stuff. The world building of this is just incredible. The Desert of Desolation series, it just does so much stuff. Ultimately, you're going to try to restore a spring of water to this area of the desert that has been dried out. That used to have these various magical water sources. You're going to have to go to these temples. You're going to have to go fight these jinn that have been out for almost 1,000 years now. So you got to go out there. You got to fight these jinn. It's great. It just does all this stuff in such a great way. And then so again, I think you're getting this really great sense of stuff and wonder from Desert Desolation. You're going to have a lot of agency too as players. You're going to really change this place, which again I think fits into that sort of Mystara feel because it fits into a lot of different places that have deserts or Egyptian themes for that matter. I like it actually in the Isle of Dawn. You could slide it down into the Hollow World where you're running some of your more Egyptian styled former places that were existed, or you can toss it into any desert that you got. Like the Emirate that we talked about earlier, of Yalarum. There's lots of places that you can put it. It's great, and again, it has such world building, such agency. You're exploring pyramids, forgotten cities in the desert, and it has this giant epic scope to it, and again, it's going to give you the opportunity as players to have a lot of agency in it. And I think Desert Desolation is a classic set of stuff that has this more Egyptian exploration. You doing things out there that feels very much like it's just totally evincing the pulp era as a part of your Mystara world building. So I think it's been very good, and that's why it's my number 2 choice. Now my number 1 choice is Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, and also a quick shout out to Tale of the Comet too, which is a 2nd edition module, which has a very similar prop. Well, it's a little bit different, but it has a similar sort of concept. Expedition to the Barrier Peaks is all about sort of having a spaceship that's crashed, and you got to go to the Barrier Peaks and figure it out. It can fit anywhere. Technically happening in Greyhawk Peak, can fit anywhere. But the key idea with Expedition is that there's been a crash ship a long time ago, but recent activity, seismic nature, has revealed it. So you can now have a chance to go and check it out if you want. And so the reason why this is my number 1 is because it's happened already in Mystara. Earlier on in the history of Mystara, there was a spaceship called the Beagle that crashes. And you also have high tech in Blackmoor, which is an ancient civilization. You've got time travel already, where you can go back and forth from time. That's a part of various modules. So it's already, this sort of science fantasy aspect is already a part of the backstory. Adding in Tale of the Comet, which has more and as well as Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, which add that more into your world building, so you get that more than just, from Blackmoor and then maybe the DA series of 4 modules, but you're getting it more and more. I think is a key part of your world building once you've done this. Now, some people may not like it. Some play groups that you may run it may not be super fans of adding in science fiction based. I mean, if you start going down one of these modules, if you're on Expedition to the Barrier Peaks and you're fans and you're not a fan of the idea, that's fine, because why would people are going to not necessarily want science fiction in their fantasy worlds. That is not something that's in modern fantasy. It was something that used to happen lots ago before the genres were created. So I get that. If that's not something that your party's looking for, and you talk about it, or you may have a couple of shouts out to some older Blackmoor style artwork, and you're like, I don't think that would be fun. Don't, they're just shutting you down. Don't run it, right? But for folks who really like it, who engage it, and it's a key part of the world building. You're going to see, this lost alien technology that's used in a number of ways, from Serene the Flying City and its biplanes that help to protect it, to Glantry with its radiance, and some other places too. So it's all over the world. And so so adding it in here and there in some other modules just helps to underline this aspect of your world building. But it doesn't make it the main key point either. It's not all about the science fiction and science fantasy aspects. But it just sort of highlights and underlines that. So if you're having success with those already, then these are great places to go. And I've run Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, lots of places, from Norwell campaigns to ones that are set in the Grand Duchy of Karak, Mikos, and others. You just need a mountain chain, or even some hills if you wanted to. It's super easy to do. It's literally just, hey, a ship crashed here a long time ago, and some recent seismic activity has revealed it. And that's it. You're just going to check out some seismic activity, and you run into this crazy fun place. And the place is very crazy. It's very fun. It's got a lot of weird things that are happening to it, and it comes to the science fiction from a fantasy angle rather than a science fiction one. So it feels really cool as a result, and very unique as a result. So Expedition to the Barrier Peaks would be my number one choice, I think, for modules that fit the pulp flair and the style of Mystara that you can bring on over and pour it over. So from there you saw things from, you know, Desert Desolation, Expedition to Barrier Peaks was your science fiction. I also think Tale of the Comet also fits into, if you're looking for the one from the Odyssey from the 90s. That one's actually really cheap, so you can pick that up. It was not warmly received, I think, because the people who were fans of crossing the streams with your science fiction and your fantasy had not were no longer buying modules in the second edition. You know, it was a new generation of people, and so I think that it was the wrong market, I think, for Tale of the Comet. Tale of the Comet's fine. I don't have any issues with it. I think it's a perfectly fine adventure module for you to run, so you can take a look at it too. But we've tried to look at everything from things for your deserts. The APE, we've taken a look at a number of different shout outs too, from Crazy, TEGEL Manor, adding in potentially detective stuff, Forgotten Temple of Thracia. And so I tried to give you a lot of different things I think fit very nicely into Mystara and the world building from other worlds. And you've seen things from generic modules to Forgotten Realms to Greyhawk to more in here, and I've tried to give you a few things from different things. I also gave you a shout out from the Oriental Adventures books too, so that way you have a few different places to take a look at and to do some world building as a part of the sort of key pulp feel of Mystara, and to kind of underline it and to highlight. And I think all of these different modules are great ways to kind of do that for your party. So there you are. I'll go ahead and leave you to that. If you watch this, hey, thanks. Let me know what you think about it. Did you agree with any of my things? Did you think I missed something that was obvious? Happy to talk about that. If you think I had one on here you didn't think about, but you're like, hey, I think that's a pretty cool idea, love to talk with you about that too. And let me know if you decide to run it, where you decide to locate it, and those sorts of things. So again, I'll go ahead and leave you there because I don't want to take up too much of your time. But again, I just appreciate it. The fact that you spent this time watching this video, I really do appreciate it. Taking some time out of your day and spending some time with me. We all have busy days, busy lives, and so many things that are grabbing for our time and our attention. So the fact that you spent this time with me, that's very humbling, and I appreciate that. So thanks again, and have a good one.